The silence slammed into me first, a suffocating vacuum that amplified the frantic tattoo of my own heart against my ribs. Then a whisper, not in the air, but in my ear. A dry, rasping breath carrying a syllable I couldn't quite grasp, yet knew, with chilling certainty, shouldn't be there. My eyes snapped open to the familiar shadows of my room, but the familiarity offered no comfort, only the stark realization that the terror hadn't ended with the dawn. The faint, sickly luminescence of the streetlight bled through the blinds, casting thin, uneven bars of pallid light that did little to rasate the oppressive darkness. This wasn't the comforting stillness of a sleeping house. It was a pregnant pause, the quiet before another, more insidious sound. A frantic pulse hammered against my ribs, a primal alarm bell ringing even though my conscious mind struggled to find a logical trigger. Had a fragmented nightmare clung to the edges of my awareness, its residual fear now manifesting in this unreasoning dread? Or was it something more tangible, a subtle shift in the atmosphere of the room that my subconscious registered as a clear and present danger? The air hung thick and stagnant, not just heavy, but almost viscous, clinging to my skin like a damp shroud. A faint, unsettling mustiness permeated the space, a scent that spoke of disuse and hidden corners, subtly undermining the supposed safety of my bedroom. The familiar hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen, usually a comforting white noise, now felt distant and strangely muted, as if a barrier had fallen between it and me. Even the occasional creak of the old house settling, normally a benign reminder of its age, sounded hesitant tonight, like the timbers themselves were holding their breath, listening alongside me. Then the whisper returned, no longer a phantom at the edge of hearing, but a distinct, if still faint, intrusion. It possessed a delicate, almost ethereal quality, yet within its softness lay a disturbing lack of discernible form. It wasn't the understandable murmur of distant voices. Instead, it was a broken sequence of sibilant sounds, vowels stretched and distorted, hinting at meaning just beyond my grasp, a linguistic puzzle designed to unsettle rather than inform. It felt closer now, as if the speaker had moved from a far distance to the very edge of my room, perhaps even just beyond the wall. Hello? The word tore through the oppressive silence, my own voice sounding alien and exposed. The tremor in my tone betrayed the fragile courage I attempted to project, a pathetic defiance against the unseen presence that felt instantly foolish in the face of the pervasive dread. The whispering ceased once more, the silence that followed even heavier, charged with an unspoken anticipation. I sat bolt upright, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. My eyes darted nervously to every pocket of shadow, those inky voids where the weak light offered no reassurance. The blinds swayed almost imperceptibly, stirred by an unseen current of air, casting elongated, dancing shapes on the walls, but within the room itself, nothing moved. Everything appeared normal, yet the air thrummed with an undeniable wrongness. I told myself it was nothing, the overstimulated nerves of a sleep-deprived mind conjuring auditory hallucinations. The lingering residue of the previous night's terror, amplified by the stillness and the darkness. It had to be that. But even as I clung to this fragile thread of logic, a cold certainty settled deep within me. The terror hadn't ended with the dawn, and whatever was beyond the walls was far from gone. I lay back down, phone clutched tight, but sleep remained elusive. Behind my eyelids, the whispering persisted, a vibration in the walls exhaling secrets. Not real. The mantra felt flimsy against the fear rooted in my surroundings. Morning offered no solace, only a starker sense of the house's malevolence. Its silence watchful, poised. The day was a jumpy blur of ordinary sounds turned ominous, shadows a lie. By dusk, dread was a physical weight, the hallway light, a pathetic shield, and the phone, a digital sword, futile rituals. The lie of not being scared tasted like ash. Shadows in corners pulsed with hidden energy. Then the whisper returned, urgent, striving to break through. It crawled through the walls, an insidious infestation. Alex, my name, a fetid breath against my ear. I recoiled, phone clattering. Light revealed nothing, but the whispering continued, a chilling presence within my sanctuary. Sleep was a battlefield lost. The next night, rationality was a crumbling fortress. Just a house, the words felt hollow. Deep down, disbelief reigned. Every light blazed a fragile halo against sentient shadows. The light offered no safety, only sharpened the darkness. Phone in hand, battery a dwindling lifeline. Hours stretched, ordinary sounds now sinister triggers. Exhaustion clawed, but sleep felt like surrender. Then the lights died. Blackness slammed down, phone a weak beacon revealing monstrous shapes. Lamp switch, nothing. Great, I muttered, panic rising. The power outage felt deliberate, the house mocking. Phone flashlight trembled. Colder air, heavier, stealing breath. Then a faint, insidious scratching from the wall behind the bed, delicate claws dragging wood. Slow, deliberate, wanting to be heard. Heart hammered. Beam shook on blank plaster. Scratching continued, dry, insistent. Hello? Silence. Then from the other side, Alex. My name, a phantom exhalation. Ice in my veins. Recoiled, phone dropped. Light flickered on blank wall. Whispering persisted, intimate, relentless. Pressed ear to cold plaster. Alex, over and over, a breathy chant burrowing into my mind. Stumbled back, mind racing. Not real, couldn't be. But the cold certainty screamed otherwise. Snatched the paring knife, pathetic defense. Pressed it to the wall, whispering stop. Then scratching again, louder, urgent claws raking wood. What do you want? Silence. Then a faint, weighted breath. Let us in. Plural. Fresh terror. Stumbled back, heart pounding. Didn't know what to do. Whispers, scratching, voices demanding entry. Not safe. Scrambled off bed, grabbed phone, bolted, slammed the door on unseen enemy. Hallway black, burned out bulb mocking. Huddled on couch, knife clutched, gaze fixed on the dark hall. Sleep impossible. Every closing eyelid brought the faint pursuing scratch. Dawn offered no relief. Years of sleeplessness etched on my body. Mind a fog of fear. Unease sharper. House wrong, violated, alive, watching, waiting. Couldn't stay. But where to go? The terrifying question echoed in the silence. Great, I muttered, my voice a trembling exhalation. Just great. I tried to cling to the frayed edges of logic. Light bulbs failed. It was a mundane fact of existence, a coincidence. It had to be. But the timing was too precise, too deliberate, a cruel punctuation mark in the symphony of my fear. The darkness that enveloped the room felt less like an absence of light and more like a tangible manifestation of the house's malevolence, as if it reveled in my vulnerability, deepening the terror with a silent, triumphant glee. I snatched my phone, the sudden beam of the flashlight slicing through the oppressive blackness. The room appeared unchanged. The familiar contours of my bed, the hulking shadow of the dresser, the neglected pile of clothes. Yet, the atmosphere had curdled. A palpable chill permeated the air, a cold that seeped deeper than the mere absence of warmth, carrying with it an oppressive weight, as if an unseen presence had thickened the very atmosphere, pressing down on me, stealing the air from my lungs. Then I heard it, a faint scratching sound, like delicate claws dragging across bare wood. It emanated from the wall directly behind my bed. I froze, my breath seizing in my throat. Each deliberate scratch was a calculated act of torment, a slow, agonizing punctuation mark in the silence, designed not just to announce its presence, but to savor my growing fear, to etch its intrusion into my consciousness. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the rising tide of panic, and my hand trembled so violently that the beam of the flashlight danced erratically across the smooth plaster. I twisted toward the wall, the shaking beam illuminating the deceptively ordinary surface. The scratching continued, faint yet relentless, a dry, insistent rasp that seemed to emanate from within the very fibers of the wood itself. Hello? I whispered, my voice a fragile thread in the suffocating darkness. The scratching abruptly ceased. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was a pregnant void, a suffocating blanket woven with anticipation, feeling less like an absence of sound and more like a conscious holding of breath by something unseen, its unseen eyes boring into me from the darkness. I sat rigid, unblinking, my gaze darting to every shadowed recess, every corner where the weak light failed to penetrate. Then, from the other side of the wall, the air itself seemed to vibrate with a whispered syllable, Alex. The sound bypassed the air, resonating directly within my skull, a phantom exhalation against the delicate shell of my ear. It wasn't just my name, it was an intimate address, a chilling acknowledgement that I was known, targeted. A glacial wave of dread washed through me, and I recoiled as if struck, my phone slipping from my numb fingers and clattering onto the floor. The weak beam flickered, plunging the room into brief, disorienting flashes of darkness before I fumbled to retrieve it, my trembling hand clumsy in the grip of terror. When the light steadied on the wall once more, there was nothing to see. Just the smooth, unbroken expanse of painted plaster, a deceptive mask of normalcy. But the whispering persisted, a faint yet relentless undercurrent, a constant reminder that something unseen was now intimately aware of me, its voice a chilling presence within the very fabric of my sanctuary. I pressed my ear against the cool, unyielding surface of the wall, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs, straining to decipher the sibilant murmurs. Alex? My name, a sibilant mantra whispered with relentless repetition, each utterance a tiny hammer blow against my sanity. It wasn't the volume that was terrifying, but the unwavering insistence, the feeling of being psychically pinned down by this unseen voice, its sole purpose to erode my composure. I stumbled back, my breath coming in ragged, shallow gasps. My mind raced, a frantic engine trying to process the impossible intrusion. It wasn't real. It couldn't be real. Yet, the cold certainty in my gut screamed otherwise. I could hear it, clear as a phantom bell, and there was no denying the chilling reality. My hand instinctively grasped the paring knife I'd impulsively left on the nightstand, a pathetic sliver of steel against a threat I couldn't see, couldn't touch. It felt less like a weapon and more like a child's toy against an unimaginable horror. My hands trembled violently, a physical manifestation of the terror that threatened to paralyze me. But the primal need to act, to do something, overrode the fear-induced inertia. I pressed the cold, sharp edge of the knife against the smooth plaster of the wall, the faint scratching of metal against paint a jarring counterpoint to the insidious whispers, and waited. The whispering abruptly ceased, leaving a silence so profound it felt as though the very air had solidified. Then the scratching returned. It was different this time, louder, more insistent, less delicate, as if whatever was behind the wall was growing impatient, its unseen claws now raking with a desperate urgency, attempting to break through the thin barrier that separated us. The sound was sharp and grating, like nails dragging across rough wood, a visceral assault on my senses that made my skin crawl and my teeth clench. I pressed the knife harder against the wall, a futile gesture of resistance, my breath coming in ragged, shallow gasps, and shouted into the darkness, my voice cracking with fear and desperation, "What do you want?" The scratching stopped, leaving a ringing void in its wake, a silence so absolute it felt as if the very world had ceased to breathe. And then, from the other side of the wall, the air itself seemed to coalesce into a single, chilling demand. "Let us in." The whisper was barely audible, a breath against the silence, yet the shift to the plural sent a fresh wave of icy dread crashing through me. It wasn't just one entity, there were others. The implications were far more terrifying than any singular presence. My blood seemed to freeze in my veins, and I stumbled back, my heart pounding a frantic tattoo against my ribs, my trembling hands barely able to maintain their grip on the useless knife, my breath coming in ragged, shallow gasps. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know what I was dealing with. The whispers, the scratching, the voice, now voices, demanding entry. All I knew, with a chilling certainty that burrowed deep into my bones, was that I wasn't safe. Not in this house, not in this room, not anywhere. Driven by a primal surge of panic, I snatched my phone, its weak beam cutting a frantic swathe through the darkness, and bolted out of the room, slamming the door shut behind me, a futile gesture of containment against an unseen enemy. The hallway was plunged in darkness, the burned-out bulb a mocking testament to my failed attempts at security, but I didn't care. I just needed to escape that wall, to put as much distance as possible between myself and the voices that now echoed not just through the plaster, but within the hollow chambers of my own mind. I spent the rest of the night huddled on the living room couch, every remaining light in the house blazing, the paring knife clutched tightly in my trembling hand, my gaze fixed on the dark maw of the hallway. Sleep was an impossibility, a forgotten luxury. Every time my eyelids drifted closed, I heard the scratching again, faint yet relentless, a phantom pursuit echoing through the very structure of the house. When the first pale light of dawn finally seeped through the living room window, it offered no sense of relief, only a stark reminder of another night survived but not conquered. I felt as though I hadn't slept in years, my body a leaden weight of exhaustion, my mind a foggy wasteland of fear. But the unease remained, sharper and more insistent than ever. The house felt wrong, fundamentally violated, as if it were alive and breathing around me, its unseen eyes constantly watching, waiting. I knew with a chilling certainty that settled deep in my bones that I couldn't stay here. But the terrifying question that echoed in the oppressive silence was, where else could I possibly go? The question of where else to flee echoed in the silence, a stark reminder of my utter helplessness. By the third night, I was a raw nerve ending stretched taut, a walking embodiment of sleepless terror. 2 days bled into a third, each sound a potential harbinger, every shadow a lurking predator. My body felt like lead, each movement a monumental effort, while my mind was a frayed tapestry of paranoia and exhaustion where the edges of reality blurred. Fear, however, remained a relentless sentinel, a primal current of adrenaline that jolted me awake at every imagined shift in the oppressive silence, a cruel paradox of being too terrified to rest and too weary to fight. The desperate mantra of "it's not real" had become a hollow echo in the chambers of my mind. Whispers, scratching, a voice calling my name from the walls, these defied logic, yet persisted with a malevolent tangibility. Was this the fracturing of my sanity? A descent into madness where fear conjured its own demons? The thought was terrifying, yet even more chilling was the unwavering certainty that this wasn't internal. Something external, something unseen, was indeed observing me. Its presence a cold weight in the suffocating stillness. My bedroom had become a forbidden zone, a psychic wound in the landscape of the house. The image of that wall, the very plaster that had vibrated with that whispered address, was enough to trigger a visceral wave of revulsion and terror, my skin prickling with phantom sensations of icy breath and unseen touch. It was a space irrevocably claimed by the unseen, a place where my sense of safety had been brutally shattered. The flickering images on the television screen were meaningless noise, a kaleidoscope of fleeting colors and sounds that failed to penetrate the suffocating bubble of fear surrounding me. My phone offered no escape, the endless scroll of information unable to compete with the insidious whispers echoing in the recesses of my mind, the phantom scratching against the walls of my skull, the chilling resonance of my own name spoken by an alien voice. My thoughts were a relentless loop, trapped in the horrifying refrain of the past 2 nights. Nightfall draped the house in a deeper, more menacing stillness. It wasn't just empty, it felt expectant, its silence a held breath pregnant with unseen intent. The very structure seemed to listen, the temperature dropping as if the house itself was drawing in a cold, otherworldly energy, preparing for the next intrusion. Retreating to the couch, bathed in the harsh glare of every light I could switch on, felt like a strategic surrender. The paring knife lay on the coffee table, a pathetic reassurance. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm, my breath shallow and uneven, but I clung to a fragile hope that the open space, the abundance of light, might offer some meager protection. Deep down, however, a cold certainty whispered of the futility of such defenses. It started around 3 a.m., the witching hour clinging to the silence like a shroud. I lay on the couch, teetering on the precipice of a fitful doze, when it began again. A faint tremor in the silence, a whisper so soft it felt like a phantom sigh against my ear. My eyes snapped open, my heart leaping into a frantic gallop. The whispering was back, a sibilant murmur just beyond the threshold of comprehension. It wasn't carried on the air. It seemed to vibrate through the very molecules of the room. I froze, every muscle tensing, my breath catching in my throat, straining to decipher the unintelligible fragments, each one a tiny barb of unease digging into my sanity. I snatched my phone, the sudden beam of light cutting through the oppressive gloom, and frantically scanned the living room. The shadows in the corners seemed to writhe and deepen, no longer mere absences of light but active concealments. A palpable chill permeated the air, heavy and suffocating, pressing down on me with the weight of an unseen entity. "Hello?" I called out, my voice a trembling betrayal of my fear. The whispering ceased, leaving a silence so profound it felt like the house itself was holding its breath, listening with malevolent intent. I sat rigid, my gaze darting between every shadowed corner, every space where the light failed to fully penetrate, the feeling of unseen eyes boring into me almost unbearable. Then, from the hallway, a sound that shattered the remnants of my fragile composure. "Alex." It was my voice, yet twisted, corrupted, echoing from the hallway with a sickening familiarity. My blood ran glacial, a primal terror seizing me. It was my inflection, my cadence, but warped, stretched, as if my own vocal cords had been hijacked by something foul, dragged through a digital hellscape of static and distortion, used to lure me into the darkness. "Alex, come here." The corrupted echo of my own voice beckoned from the hallway, a siren's call laced with static and dread. Every instinct screamed to resist, to remain rooted to the relative safety of the lit living room. Yet, there was a perverse compulsion in that distorted familiarity, a chilling resonance that bypassed my conscious fear, a subtle pull that whispered of a terrible, unavoidable destiny. The voice was coming from the end of the hallway, where the door to the basement stood slightly ajar, a black maw promising unknown horrors. I stopped, a cold dread seizing my throat. The basement door had been firmly shut, a small victory against the encroaching darkness I'd clung to. Now it stood ajar, a sliver of impenetrable blackness mocking my attempts at security. This wasn't mere chance. It felt like a deliberate invitation, a silent assertion of their power to manipulate my reality. "Alex, come downstairs." The voice that echoed from the basement was undeniably mine, the precise timbre and cadence chillingly familiar. Yet beneath the surface of that mimicry lay a disturbing hollowness, a lack of warmth or humanity, as if my vocal cords had been puppeteered by something utterly alien, a perfect imitation devoid of a soul. Knife clutched like a desperate talisman, heart hammering a frantic rhythm, I edged closer. The floorboards groaned under my weight, the sound amplified in the oppressive silence like a gunshot. A palpable chill intensified with each step, and the fetid scent of mildew and damp earth, usually a background note, now assaulted my nostrils, a tangible sign of the unseen depths below. Reaching the threshold, I hesitated. The blackness beyond wasn't merely an absence of light. It felt like a tangible entity, a breathing void that pulsed with a subtle, predatory energy, as if unseen eyes were watching me from its depths, anticipating my descent. Every primal instinct screamed for flight, for escape from the suffocating presence. Yet my limbs felt like they were encased in lead, my will overridden by the sheer audacity of hearing my own voice twisted into a beckoning lure. It was a psychic trap, the familiar weaponized against me, holding me captive in a vortex of terror. "Alex, come downstairs." The corrupted echo of my own voice was clearer now, laced with an insidious insistence. I shone the flashlight into the abyss, the beam cutting a fragile swath through the impenetrable darkness, revealing the narrow, decaying wooden steps and the damp concrete floor below. The weak light barely scratched the surface of the gloom, but it was enough to confirm the basement appeared empty, or at least it looked empty. A prickle of unease crawled up my spine, the illusion of choice shattered with brutal finality. Before I could even recoil, the basement door slammed shut with a deafening thud that reverberated through the house, a violent declaration that I was no longer in control, a sonic boom of pure, unadulterated threat. A strangled scream tore from my throat as I stumbled back, heart threatening to rupture. My hands trembled so violently the flashlight beam became a frantic dance, and my breath hitched in shallow, panicked gasps. The whispers erupted anew, no longer confined to the walls, but seemingly emanating from the very fabric of the house, from the floorboards beneath my feet to the air I struggled to breathe. It was a suffocating cacophony, an omnipresent chorus of unseen voices closing in, their insidious murmurs a tangible weight pressing down on my sanity. "Alex! Alex! Alex!" I stumbled blindly back into the living room, slamming the door shut behind me as if a thin piece of wood could offer any real protection. I collapsed onto the couch, the whispers pursuing me, faint yet relentless, a parasitic invasion crawling through the very structure of the house. Pressing my hands over my ears was a futile gesture. The insidious whispers transcended the physical confines. They had burrowed into my mind, a parasitic invasion of my thoughts, their sibilant murmurs weaving themselves into my very consciousness, blurring the line between external threat and internal breakdown. "Alex, let us in?" The words, whispered directly into my mind, sent a glacial chill down my spine, my entire body convulsing with tremors as the air around me grew preternaturally cold. Each ragged gasp I drew in felt like icy shards in my lungs, and my exhaled breath bloomed in the air before me, ephemeral clouds of mist hanging like spectral remnants, a visible testament to the unnatural cold that had gripped the house, a chilling harbinger of something profoundly wrong. Sleep remained a distant, unattainable shore. Every time my eyelids drifted closed, the whispers intensified, a relentless mental assault threatening to shatter the last vestiges of my sanity. When the first pale light of dawn finally seeped through the living room window, it offered no solace, only a stark reminder of another night survived but not conquered. I felt as though I hadn't slept in years, my body a leaden weight of exhaustion, my mind a foggy wasteland of fear. But the unease remained, sharper and more insistent than ever. The house felt wrong, fundamentally violated, as if it were alive and breathing around me, its unseen eyes constantly watching, waiting. I knew with the chilling certainty that settled deep in my bones that I couldn't stay here. But the terrifying question of where else to flee echoed in the oppressive silence, a stark reminder of my utter helplessness. The morning after the third night, I sat at the kitchen table, the cold, untouched coffee a mirror to the chill that had settled within me. My hands trembled uncontrollably, my body a leaden weight of exhaustion, yet the thought of consuming anything felt repulsive. The house was quiet now, but the dawn brought no peace, only a heavy, expectant stillness. The quiet of a predator momentarily sated but ever watchful, the very timbers seeming to hum with a residual, malevolent energy. I couldn't remain trapped within these walls. That much was a visceral certainty. But where could I possibly go? Who could I turn to with a tale of whispers, scratching, and a voice stolen from my own throat? These weren't horrors that could be easily explained, not even to myself. Yet the crushing weight of isolation left me no other recourse. I couldn't bear this alone any longer. My fingers, clumsy with fatigue and fear, navigated the contacts on my phone. The list was sparse. My move to this neighborhood, intended as an escape, had inadvertently left me adrift, without a reliable lifeline. But there was Sarah. She had been instrumental in finding this house, her initial enthusiasm a siren song that had lured me here. If anyone possessed the capacity for belief, however improbable my story, it would be her. My thumb hovered over her name, a beacon of potential salvation in the encroaching darkness of my despair. But the words I needed to speak felt impossibly absurd, the confession of a mind unraveling. My house is haunted. Voices whisper from the walls. My own voice is calling me to the basement. The fear of her disbelief, of being labeled insane, was almost as paralyzing as the supernatural terror itself. Yet the crushing weight of isolation left me no other recourse. Sanity be damned. I needed an anchor in this nightmare. With a trembling finger, I pressed the call button and held the phone to my ear, the frantic thumping of my heart echoing the silent ringing. For a torturous moment, I feared she wouldn't answer, leaving me adrift in this sea of terror. But then, her voice cut through the silence, a bright, cheerful melody that felt jarringly out of sync with the suffocating dread that clung to me. Her casual greeting was a stark reminder of the normalcy I had lost, a painful chasm separating her reality from the terrifying abyss I now inhabited. "Hey Alex, what's up?" My throat constricted, the carefully constructed words dissolving into a choked silence. A crushing weight pressed against my chest, and for a terrifying instant, I thought I would succumb to a wave of hysterical tears. I forced a deep, shuddering breath, desperately trying to anchor myself, and finally the words, raw and desperate, escaped my lips. "Sarah, I need your help." There was a beat of silence stretched across the line, thick with unspoken questions. When Sarah's voice finally returned, the initial cheer had been replaced by a cautious softness, a concerned inquiry tinged with the unmistakable undercurrent of worry for my well-being, perhaps even my sanity. "What's wrong? Are you okay?" "No," I choked out, my voice a fragile tremor betraying the raw terror that had become my constant companion. "I'm not okay. Something is deeply wrong in this house. It defies explanation, Sarah, but it's malevolent, truly bad." "What do you mean?" she asked, the concern in her voice deepening, yet still laced with a hesitant disbelief. "What's happening?" My mind raced, a frantic scramble to translate the impossible into something comprehensible. I decided to anchor my explanation to the tangible, the least likely to trigger immediate dismissal. "I've been hearing things," I began, my voice barely above a whisper. "At night? Whispers, Sarah, and scratching. And a voice. It's been calling my name." A long beat of silence stretched across the line, the unspoken skepticism palpable. I could almost hear the gears turning in her mind, trying to find a rational explanation. When she spoke again, her tone was carefully neutral. "Alex, try to be objective for a moment. Could it be just the house settling? The wind whistling through old eaves? These old places can play tricks on your ears." "It's not the house," I exclaimed, a surge of frustrated desperation welling up within me. "It's not the wind, Sarah. I know what I heard. It's real. It's not normal." Okay, she said quickly, her tone placating, trying to reel me back from the edge. "I believe you. I don't know what to say. Have you called anyone? Like a professional? Maybe there's something wrong with the wiring? Or..." "It's not the wiring," I snapped, my voice tight with rising panic. "This isn't a faulty appliance, Sarah. There's a presence here, something insidious, something fundamentally wrong with this house." A hesitant pause hung in the air before Sarah spoke again, her tone gentle, almost tentative. "Alex, You have been through a lot lately. The move, the fresh start, stress can manifest in unexpected ways. Could your mind be playing tricks on you? I'm not imagining it. I choked out, my voice trembling on the verge of tears. I know what I heard. I know what I saw. What did you see? She asked, her tone cautious, probing. My mind flashed back to the gaping maw of the basement door, to the chillingly familiar yet alien voice that had beckoned me into the darkness. I don't know, I stammered, the images still vivid and terrifying. Shadows, maybe. But the voice? It sounded like me, Sarah. It sounded like me. A long silence stretched, thick with her internal debate. I could feel my fragile hope dwindling, the weight of her unspoken disbelief pressing down on me. Alex, she said finally, her tone gentle but firm, the therapist's caution seeping in. I think you need to talk to someone. A professional, maybe. It sounds like you're going through a lot, and I don't need someone to analyze my stress, Sarah. I cried out, my voice cracking with the weight of unshed tears and mounting terror. I need someone to believe what I'm telling you. I do believe you, she said quickly, but the subtle hesitation in her voice betrayed the doubt that lingered. I don't know how to help you. A shaky breath escaped my lips, my hands trembling violently as I gripped the phone like a lifeline. Just come over, Sarah, please. I need you to see it for yourself. Another long silence stretched, thick with her internal debate. Finally, a sigh escaped her lips. Okay, Alex, she conceded, her tone still laced with reservation. I'll come over, but I need you to be honest with me. If this is all in your head, you have to promise me you'll consider talking to someone. Deal? Deal, I said quickly, relief flooding through me, a fragile raft in a stormy sea of fear. Thank you, Sarah, thank you. I'll be there in 20 minutes, she said, her tone softening slightly with a hint of genuine concern. Just hang tight, okay? Okay, I whispered, my voice still trembling. I'll see you soon. I hung up the phone and let out a shuddering breath, my hands still shaking uncontrollably. A fragile tendril of hope, the first in what felt like an eternity, tentatively unfurled within me. Sarah was coming. Perhaps her presence would somehow dispel the oppressive atmosphere. Perhaps she would witness something that would validate my terror. Perhaps I wasn't teetering on the brink of madness. But beneath that fragile optimism, a cold knot of dread remained, a premonition that this wouldn't be the simple resolution I so desperately craved. The 20 minutes Sarah promised stretched into an agonizing eternity. I sat at the kitchen table, my gaze fixed on the front door, the paring knife clutched tightly in my trembling hand, a pathetic shield against an unseen enemy. The silence in the house intensified, no longer a neutral absence of sound, but a heavy, expectant stillness. The very air seemed to crackle with an unseen energy. Every creak of the floorboards, every faint hum of the refrigerator felt amplified, imbued with a sinister significance, like the house itself was alive and breathing around me, its unseen eyes constantly watching. My gaze flickered to my phone, the illuminated screen a stark contrast to the encroaching darkness. 10:47, 10:52, 10:58. Where was she? The mantra of reassurance, she's just running late, there's nothing to worry about, felt increasingly hollow against the rising tide of unease in my chest. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed to writhe and deepen, and I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, my head snapping around every few seconds, as if expecting to see a tangible manifestation of the terror. A deeper, more chilling realization settled within me. Whatever had taken root in this house wasn't a passive presence. It was active, intelligent, and it had made its intentions clear. It wouldn't simply vanish with the arrival of a witness. It wouldn't let me go without a fight. Finally, at 11:03, headlights cut through the darkness, and Sarah's car rolled to a stop in the driveway. Relief, sharp and immediate, flooded through me. I yanked open the door, the cool night air a momentary reprieve. Sarah emerged, the streetlight casting long shadows, her expression a blend of concern and weary resignation. Her small, reassuring smile didn't quite reach her eyes as she offered a soft, "Hey, you holding it together?" I managed a shaky nod, though my trembling hands, bloodshot eyes, and the knife clutched like a lifeline screamed otherwise. "Thanks for coming," I rasped, my voice hoarse and thin. Stepping inside, Sarah's gaze swept over the living room, taking in the pervasive dimness despite the numerous lamps, a subtle unease flickering across her features. "Okay," she began, her voice low and cautious, the cheerfulness from the phone completely absent. "Lay it on me. What exactly have you been dealing with?" I locked the door, a futile gesture against the unseen, and gestured Sarah into the living room. It's beyond explanation, I stammered, my voice a shaky whisper, inadequate for the terror. Something profoundly wrong is in this house. Sarah's brow furrowed with skepticism, but she sat tensely, waiting. I took a shuddering breath. It started with whispers at night, then scratching. Last night, my voice hitched, the memory raw. Last night, Sarah, I heard my voice calling my name from the walls. The unbelievable confession hung in the air. Sarah's concern softened her expression, but her first thought was rational. Alex, honey, you've been under a lot of stress lately. Maybe. No, I interrupted, the desperation in my voice sharp. It's not stress, Sarah. I know what I heard. I know it's real. Sarah held up her hands, her gaze steady, a flicker of something beyond skepticism now present. Okay, she said slowly, deliberately. I'm here. Show me. Is anything happening right now? A wave of helpless frustration washed over me. My gaze flicked nervously towards the hallway, where the basement door remained stubbornly closed. It's dormant now, I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. But it always begins after dark, around midnight. Sarah nodded, her expression thoughtful, a plan forming in her eyes. All right, she said. Then we wait. If something unusual happens, I'll be here to witness it. And if the night passes quietly, then we explore other possibilities, okay? A sharp retort, a desperate plea for her unwavering belief, hovered on my tongue, but I swallowed it down. For now, Sarah was here. Her presence, even tinged with doubt, was a fragile shield against the suffocating isolation I had endured. We sat in the dimly lit living room, the silence stretching between us, thick with unspoken tension. Sarah made a valiant effort at small talk, her voice a low murmur as she asked about work and the neighborhood, but my mind was a tightly wound spring, my ears straining for the slightest deviation from the mundane quiet. Then, as the digital clock on the mantelpiece flickered to 12 o'clock, a faint, almost imperceptible susurrus brushed against the edge of my hearing. Do you hear that? I whispered, my voice a barely audible tremor. Sarah frowned, her head cocked, straining to decipher the stillness. Hear what, Alex? The whispering intensified, a raspy murmur growing steadily louder, and I watched the precise moment comprehension dawned on her face. Her eyes widened, the color draining away, and she turned to me, a raw, unfiltered fear etched in her features. What in God's name? A tremor ran through me, a chilling blend of terror and a grim, unsettling vindication. I told you, I whispered, my voice hoarse with days of fear. It's real. The whispering seemed to swirl around us, an unseen presence filling the air with its sibilant murmurs. It was faint and raspy, like a breath of icy air against our ears, and I felt the hairs on the back of my neck prickle with a primal dread. Alex. Then, cutting through the pervasive whispers, a single word, chillingly familiar yet deeply wrong, echoed from the hallway with a sickening resonance. Sarah flinched, her breath hitching. Did you? She began, her eyes wide with disbelief. Before I could answer, the voice returned, louder, more insistent, the hollowness beneath the perfect imitation now undeniable. Alex, come downstairs. It was my voice, yet stripped of all warmth, all humanity, a puppet's utterance animated by something cold and dead. Sarah's breath hitched, her face a mask of stark terror. Her hand shot out, gripping my arm with a desperate strength, her fingers digging into my flesh like anchors in a storm. Is that you? She gasped, her voice barely audible. No, I choked out, my own fear mirroring hers, the denial a desperate attempt to cling to some semblance of reality. It's not me, Sarah, it's not me. The voice roared again, closer, more demanding, and a low thrum resonated through the floorboards beneath our feet, a tangible vibration that felt less like sound and more like a tremor emanating from the very heart of the house, a physical manifestation of the entity's growing power. Alex, let us in. Sarah recoiled as if struck, her breath catching in her throat. Her hands trembled violently, and her eyes darted frantically towards the door. We have to get out, she gasped, her voice raw with primal fear. Right now, before it's too late. I nodded, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs, and snatched the knife from the coffee table. But as we turned toward the front door, the whispering ceased abruptly. But the silence that descended was far more terrifying. It wasn't an absence of sound, but a palpable presence, a suffocating blanket of dread that pressed down on us, stealing the air from our lungs and clouding our thoughts with a thick, paralyzing fear. Then, From the hallway, a new sound emerged. Slow, deliberate footsteps, each footfall heavy and measured, as if an unseen entity was approaching with a chilling sense of purpose, the sound echoing the inexorable advance of dread. Sarah's hand shot out, her fingers icy and slick with sweat as they clamped around mine, her grip vice-like as she tugged me towards the front door. "Please," she hissed, her voice a frantic whisper. "We have to run. Now." But before we could move, the footsteps stopped, and the voice returned, closer and more insistent than before. "Alex, let us in." The words, laced with an unnerving patience and a hint of something far more sinister, resonated directly within my bones, sending a tremor of icy dread through my entire being. A glacial chill permeated the air, and the shadows clinging to the corners of the room writhed and elongated into grotesque shapes, their edges blurring as if they possessed a life of their own, reaching out like grasping tendrils. Sarah's face was ashen, her eyes wide and filled with a raw, unadulterated terror that mirrored my own. What do we do?" she whispered, her voice barely a breath. "I don't know," I choked out, my voice shaking uncontrollably. I don't know." The footsteps ceased, and the suffocating silence that followed was broken only by the frantic hammering of my heart. Sarah and I stood frozen, the air thick with an icy dread. Her grip on my arm was vice-like, her nails digging into my skin. "Alex," the voice came again, low and guttural, echoing through the house, but now it seemed to emanate from right behind us. I spun around, the flashlight beam from my phone cutting through the darkness, but there was nothing there. Just the empty room, the grotesque shadows stretching long and jagged across the walls. My breath hitched in shallow gasps, and the knife trembled violently in my hand. "Did you see that?" Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. "See what?" I asked, my voice shaking. She pointed toward the hallway, her hand trembling uncontrollably. There was something. A shadow. It moved. I turned the flashlight toward the hallway, the beam shaking as I tried to steady my hand. The basement door remained closed, but the shadows around it seemed to writhe with a deeper, more malevolent energy. I took a hesitant step forward, my legs trembling, and Sarah's grip tightened. "What are you doing?" she hissed, her voice laced with panic. "We need to get out of here. I need to see," I whispered, a morbid curiosity overriding my fear. "I need to know what's in there." "Are you insane?" she hissed, her voice rising hysterically. "You heard it. You saw it. Whatever's in this house, it's not normal. We need to leave. Now." I hesitated, my eyes locked on the basement door. An unseen force seemed to emanate from it, a subtle but undeniable pull, as if an invisible tether had latched onto me, an unholy beckoning that resonated with a terrifying familiarity. "Alex!" The voice roared again, closer, more demanding, and a low thrum resonated through the floorboards beneath us. "Come downstairs!" Sarah's grip tightened, her knuckles white, and she tugged frantically on my arm, her voice cracking with desperation and terror. "Alex, no! Please don't do this!" "I can't just leave," I said, a strange resolve in my voice. "I need to know what's down there. What's happening to me?" Sarah stared, terrified, then nodded slowly, her voice trembling. "Fine, I'm coming with you. We face it together." "No, it's not safe here. Like hell I'm abandoning you," she stated, surprisingly firm. I hesitated, then nodded, a mix of fear and grim acceptance tightening my throat, and turned back to the hallway. The walk to the basement door felt like a descent into the abyss. The air grew colder with every step, and the grotesque shadows writhed and elongated around us. My flashlight beam flickered erratically, and I could feel my heart pounding a heavy, ominous rhythm in my chest. My hand trembled as I reached for the doorknob. The wood felt unnaturally cold, leaching the warmth from my skin, and a faint, unsettling vibration pulsed beneath my fingertips, a subtle thrumming that hinted at a malevolent energy contained within. "Are you sure about this?" Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. "No," I confessed, my voice trembling, the words laced with a chilling resignation. "Not anymore. I don't think we do." I turned the knob, the metal cold against my clammy skin, and pushed the door open. The open doorway revealed a void of absolute darkness, a suffocating blackness that seemed to physically devour the beam of my flashlight, leaving only a meager, inadequate sliver of light to penetrate its oppressive depths. The air that wafted up was damp and heavy, thick with the cloying scent of mildew and decaying earth. "Alex?" The voice resonated from the abyss below, amplified and laced with an unholy allure, a perversion of my own voice beckoning me into its domain. "Come downstairs." I took a shuddering breath, my hands shaking so violently the flashlight beam danced erratically, and stepped onto the first stair. The aged wood groaned under my weight, the sound echoing into the blackness, and I felt Sarah's hand clamp onto my shoulder, a surprisingly steadying presence. We descended slowly, the flashlight beam cutting a shaky path through the darkness, revealing the narrow, decaying wooden steps and the damp concrete floor below. The air grew frigid, each descending step feeling like a deeper plunge into a frozen tomb, and the weight of the house seemed to intensify, pressing down on us with a palpable force, as if the very structure was a living entity intent on crushing us within its grasp. Reaching the bottom, I swept the flashlight beam across the cavernous space, the discarded junk, deceptively ordinary. Yet, the normalcy was a fragile veneer, shattered by the increasingly insistent voice that vibrated through the floor, a palpable tremor of unseen power. There was nothing overtly menacing, nothing immediately out of place. "Alex, let us in." The disembodied voice emanated from the far corner, a chaotic jumble of forgotten furniture and dusty boxes huddled against the wall, the shadows clinging to it with an unnatural density, a tangible darkness that pulsed with a sense of dreadful anticipation. I took a hesitant step forward, my breath catching in my throat, and Sarah's grip tightened on my arm. "What are you doing?" she whispered, her voice a strained tremor. "I need to see," I managed, my voice barely audible above the frantic pounding of my heart. Moving closer, flashlight beam shaking, the darkness writhed, and the frigid air bit my skin. Reaching the shadowy pile, heart hammering, I reached for a dusty box. The moment my fingers brushed it, the whisper stopped, plunging the basement into an absolute, unnatural silence. A heavy void amplifying my frantic heartbeat. I turned to Sarah, seeing raw terror in her wide eyes. Then, a flicker in the periphery, a distortion of the darkness behind the pile. Too swift, too unnatural, a glimpse of something tall and impossibly gaunt. Its limbs elongated and spindly, its head tilted at a grotesque angle. And then, twin points of malevolent light, glowing eyes that burned like cold embers, fixing on us, piercing the gloom. It moved with a jerky, marionette-like motion, defying the natural laws of movement. Sarah recoiled, a strangled scream tearing from her throat, echoing through the cold concrete. I stumbled back, my heart threatening to burst. The air around the shadow seemed to thicken, a palpable weight pressing down on my chest, stealing my breath, an oppressive aura of pure malice that threatened to crush my very will. "Alex," the voice echoed again, but now it was a chorus, no longer localized to the shadow but emanating from everywhere. The cold concrete walls, the damp floor beneath our feet, the very air vibrating with their unified demand. "Let us in." I grabbed Sarah's hand, my breath coming in ragged, panicked gasps, and yanked her toward the stairs. "We need to go," I choked out, my voice trembling uncontrollably. "Now." Heart pounding, we scrambled back up the creaking stairs, our panicked descent echoing through the house, and slammed the basement door shut. A futile attempt to contain the horror. The whispering erupted anew, louder and more insistent, and the floorboards vibrated beneath our feet. "Alex, let us in." Sarah whirled around, her face a mask of stark terror, her eyes wide and unblinking, reflecting the lingering horror. "What in God's name was that?" she gasped, her voice a mere thread of sound. I don't know," I stammered, my voice trembling, a cold certainty settling in my gut. "But this isn't over, Sarah, not by a long shot." The whispering intensified, filling the house with its oppressive weight, and the frigid air clung to us like a shroud. The grotesque shadows in the corners of the living room seemed to writhe and deepen, and I knew we couldn't remain here. "We need to leave," I said, my voice firm despite the tremor, grabbing Sarah's hand. "Now." But as we turned toward the front door, the whispering abruptly ceased, and the unified voice roared again, closer, more insistent than ever before. "Alex, let us in." And then, impossibly, from the corner of the living room, the shadow stepped fully into the meager light. The shadow stood in the corner of the room, its form barely distinguishable from the darkness it seemed to bleed from. It was impossibly tall and gaunt, its limbs elongated and spindly, its head tilted at a grotesque angle as if surveying us with a chilling curiosity. Its glowing eyes burned like cold embers, piercing through the dim light, and the air around it shimmered and distorted, as though the very fabric of reality was warping in its presence. Sarah recoiled, a choked gasp escaping her lips, her nails digging deeper into my arm. "Alex," she whispered, her voice trembling uncontrollably. "What is that?" Frozen by terror, I stared at the shadow. Then, a guttural voice, seemingly from the house itself, commanded, "Alex, come downstairs." Sarah urged escape, but as I moved, the shadow glided, blocking us. The voice repeated the command, and the basement door swung open, the darkness beckoning. "Alex, don't!" Sarah cried. "It won't stop," I replied, compelled. The shadow watched as I approached the open door. Whispers surrounded me, and the door felt icy, vibrating, descending. The cold intensified. The whispers grew louder. "Alex, let us in." In the corner, behind the junk, I found a small, unsettling wooden figurine. The moment I touched it, the whispering became deafening. "Alex, let us in." A powerful pull dragged me towards the corner as the voice roared, "Come downstairs." I scrambled back upstairs, slamming the door. Sarah, pale and terrified, whispered, "What happened? What did you find?" I held up the crudely carved figurine, my hands trembling violently. "This," I whispered, my voice thin and strained, as if the very act of holding it drained my strength. "I found it, in the basement. I think this is it." Sarah stared at the innocuous-looking piece of wood, her expression a bewildered mix of terror and confusion. What is that supposed to be?" she stammered, unable to grasp its horrifying significance. The insidious whispers slithered back into the silence, faint at first, then rising in a chilling crescendo. A glacial cold permeated the air, raising goosebumps on my arms, and the shadows clinging to the corners of the room writhed and elongated into grotesque animated shapes. "We need to leave," I urged, grabbing Sarah's icy hand. "Now," but as we turned toward the front door, the whispers swelled, and the unified voice roared, closer and more insistent than before. "Alex, let us in." The shadow detached itself from the corner, stepping fully into the meager light, its form a shifting, nightmarish silhouette that seemed to defy the laws of physics, twisting and contorting as if held together by a fragile, unseen force. Its glowing eyes intensified, burning into me with a malevolent focus, a palpable weight pressing down on my sternum, stealing my breath. The wooden figurine in my hand now possessed a disturbing weight, a cold, dense mass that seemed to pulse with a faint, internal thrumming against my palm, as if a trapped life force stirred within its carved form. Sarah recoiled with a sharp gasp, stumbling back against the wall, her face a canvas of pure terror. "Alex," she whispered, her voice a fragile thread. "What is that thing? What's happening?" "I don't know," I choked out, my voice trembling uncontrollably. "But it's not going to stop." The whispers swelled into a deafening cacophony, a chorus of unseen voices swirling around us, overlapping and echoing in a disorienting vortex of sound. Though the individual words remained indistinct, the collective tone was a chilling tapestry of pleading desperation, raw anger, and a palpable sense of loss. The air grew so cold I could see my breath clouding before me like ghostly exhalations. "Alex," the unified voice boomed, closer now, and a low thrum vibrated through the floorboards beneath our feet, resonating deep within my bones. "Let us in." The shadow glided closer, its unnatural gait unnerving, and I felt an invisible force tugging at me. A subtle but insistent pull drawing me inexorably towards the dark maw of the basement, as if an unseen tether had latched onto my very soul. The scratches on the figurine now seemed to deepen and writhe like angry scars, and the pulsing energy within it intensified, a cold, vibrant thrumming that resonated in my very bones. "We need to leave," Sarah pleaded, her voice frantic. "Now, Alex, we can't stay here." I nodded, my throat tight with terror, and grabbed her hand, pulling her towards the front door. But the moment we reached it, the whispers abruptly ceased, and the silence that followed was a deafening, oppressive weight. The air felt heavy, suffocating, and the weight of the house pressed down on me with an unbearable force. My hand shot out to the doorknob, but it remained stubbornly fixed, unyielding to my frantic grasp. It felt as if the very wood had solidified, fused to the frame by an unseen force. Panic clawed at my throat as I wrenched at it, but the door remained immovably sealed. "It won't open," I choked out, my voice trembling with dawning horror. "We're trapped, Sarah, truly trapped." Sarah's eyes widened in stark terror, and she whirled around to face me, her face ashen. "What do you mean trapped? There has to be another way." I shook my head, my breath coming in shallow, panicked gasps. I don't know what's happening." The whisper slithered back, louder this time, and the vibrations in the floor grew stronger, a palpable tremor beneath our feet. The shadow remained a silent sentinel in the center of the room, its burning gaze unwavering, locked onto me. It didn't need to move. Its very presence was a suffocating weight, a palpable sense of malevolent anticipation, as if it were patiently waiting for a preordained moment. "Alex," the unified voice echoed, and the pull intensified, a powerful, almost magnetic force dragging me back towards the shadowed corner. "Come downstairs." I stumbled back, clutching the figurine tightly in my hand, and turned to Sarah, my eyes wide with a dawning, terrifying realization. "It's the figurine," I whispered, my voice trembling with a chilling understanding. "It's the key, Sarah. It's connected to everything. I think it's what they've been wanting all along." "Then get rid of it," she shrieked, her voice rising hysterically. "Throw it away, break it, burn it, do something." I hesitated, my eyes locked on the crudely carved wood. The scratches on the figurine now seemed to deepen and writhe like angry scars, and the pulsing energy within it intensified, a cold, vibrant thrumming that resonated in my very bones. It felt undeniably alive, its crude form radiating a malevolent awareness, its unseeing gaze fixed on me, as if it held some terrible expectation. But as I raised my hand to throw it, the whispers erupted into a deafening roar, more insistent than ever, and the invisible force tugging me towards the basement intensified. The shadow glided closer, its unnatural limbs twisting and contorting in anticipation, and the glacial air around me seemed to solidify. "Alex," the unified voice boomed, almost deafening, and the vibrations in the floor threatened to knock me off my feet. "Let us in." I froze, my hand trembling. The figurine clutched tightly. I looked at Sarah, her face a mask of utter panic. "I don't think I can," I whispered, my voice barely audible above the din. "It's not going to let me." She stared at me, her eyes wide with a terror that mirrored my own, the panic rising in her chest like a suffocating tide. "Then what do we do?" she choked out. "How do we stop this?" "I don't know," I said, my throat tight with a grim certainty. "But I think I have to go back down there." "Are you completely mad?" Sarah shrieked, her voice cracking with raw terror. "You can't go back down there. You saw that thing. You heard what it wants." "I have to, Sarah," I said, my voice a trembling whisper, the words laced with a grim fatalism. "It won't ever stop, not until I face it." The whispering intensified into a deafening vortex of sound, swirling around us like a malevolent storm. The invisible force tugging me towards the basement became a physical drag, and the figurine in my hand vibrated with a feverish energy, its jagged edges biting into my palm like tiny claws. "Alex?" The voice boomed again, closer and more imperious, a command that resonated deep within my bones. "Come downstairs." I turned toward the hallway, my legs trembling uncontrollably, and took a hesitant step forward. The shadow remained a silent sentinel, its burning gaze fixed on my back. Please be careful," Sarah choked out, her voice barely a whisper of despair, tears welling in her wide, ashen eyes as I turned to offer a weak, forced smile. "I'll be all right," I lied, the words hollow. "Just stay here, please. I'll come back." With a final, shuddering breath, the weight of the house pressing down on me, I stepped into the hallway. The basement door yawned open, a black abyss swallowing all light, and the pull intensified, a siren's call drawing me towards its inescapable depths. The whispers grew louder, a maddening chorus. I placed my trembling foot on the first creaking step of the descent. The air in the stairwell was a suffocating miasma of dampness and bone-chilling cold, clinging to me like a grave shroud, stealing the warmth from my body with each descending step. The figurine in my hand pulsed with a frantic energy, its rough surface digging into my skin. The whispering intensified into a disorienting maelstrom of sound, a chaotic symphony of unseen voices echoing off the cold concrete walls, seeming to emanate from the very fabric of the basement, a maddening chorus with no discernible source. "Alex!" The voice boomed again, low and guttural, reverberating through the concrete. "Let us in!" A desperate glance over my shoulder revealed only the empty doorway at the top of the stairs. Sarah hadn't followed. A pang of loneliness, sharp and cold, pierced through my fear. But I couldn't fault her. I was alone now, utterly alone in the face of whatever awaited me in the darkness. The beam of my flashlight sputtered, weakening as I reached the bottom of the stairs. The basement was just as I'd left it, bare concrete walls, piles of old furniture and boxes, and shadows that seemed to writhe with a malevolent energy. But now, the air thrummed with a palpable, malevolent energy, a tangible force that raised goosebumps on my arms and sent a primal shiver of dread crawling across my skin. I shone the flashlight towards the corner where I'd found the figurine, half expecting to see the shadowy figure waiting. But the corner was empty. The pile of junk remained undisturbed, the darkness around it still and silent. For a fleeting moment, a fragile tendril of hope flickered within me. Maybe it was over. Maybe the figurine had been the source, and now that I held it, the nightmare would end. Then, the cacophony of whispers abruptly ceased, replaced by a silence so profound it amplified the frantic pounding of my heart. I could hear my own breathing, shallow and ragged, and the faint hum of the dying flashlight in my hand. And then, cutting through the oppressive stillness, a single, deliberate footstep echoed from the far reaches of the basement, a sound pregnant with ominous intent. I froze, my heart hammering against my ribs, and turned the flashlight toward the sound. The beam flickered, casting grotesque shadows that danced on the walls. But I couldn't see anything. The darkness seemed to thicken, swallowing the meager light. "Alex!" The voice boomed again, closer now, and the floor vibrated beneath my feet, a tangible tremor of unseen power. "Let us in." The figurine in my hand grew warmer, almost searing, and its jagged edges bit deeper into my skin. I stumbled back, my breath coming in ragged gasps, and pointed the failing flashlight toward the center of the room. Then they materialized from the inky blackness. Figures, dozens of them, coalescing from the shadows like nightmares given form. Their bodies were elongated and gaunt, their limbs twisted into grotesque angles, and their eyes burned with an inner malevolent light, like embers glowing in the abyss. Their movements were jerky and unnatural, like puppets animated by unseen strings. They converged on me, a silent, shuffling horde, their unnatural forms encircling me, cutting off any hope of escape. Their whispering voices overlapped in a chaotic, sibilant symphony. "Alex, let us in." I stumbled back, clutching the burning figurine, and felt the cold, damp concrete of the wall press against my spine. The figures moved closer, their glowing eyes fixed on me with an unnerving intensity, and the air grew so cold it bit at my exposed skin. My flashlight sputtered, the beam weakening, then dying altogether, plunging me into the absolute, suffocating darkness of the basement, surrounded by unseen horrors. "Stay back!" I shouted, my voice trembling, a pathetic cry swallowed by the darkness. "Stay away from me!" But they didn't stop. The sheer number, their unnatural movements, the oppressive cold. It was overwhelming. A futile resistance flickered and died within me. I was utterly powerless against this encroaching darkness. They kept moving closer, their whispering voices growing louder, more insistent. I could feel the vibrations in the floor beneath my feet, the cold seeping into my bones. Then, the edged scratches on the figurine began to glow with an eerie, internal luminescence, pulsing with a vibrant energy that thrummed against my skin, growing in intensity until it felt like a live wire in my hand. An intuitive understanding bloomed in my mind. This wasn't just an object, it was a key, a guide. "Alex," the voice boomed again, closer and more imperious, a command that resonated deep within my bones. "Let us in." With a deep breath, my hands trembling violently, I stepped forward. The grotesque figures halted their advance, their burning eyes fixed on me with an unnerving stillness, the chaotic whispers receding into a hushed, almost eager anticipation. I extended the glowing figurine into the darkness. "What do you want?" I shouted, my voice echoing through the silent basement. "Why are you doing this?" The whispers ceased entirely, and for a moment there was only a profound, ringing silence. And then, from the darkness, a single voice spoke with a chilling resonance. "You took what was ours." The words struck me like a physical blow, a weight of unseen eyes pressing down, heavy with centuries of resentment and loss. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice trembling. "What did I take?" The figures moved closer, their burning eyes intensifying, and the voice rasped, laced with a desperate sorrow. "The figurine, it binds us to this place, a cursed tether. Return it, and perhaps we can finally be free." I looked down at the glowing figurine in my hand, the vibrant energy pulsing against my palm. An agonizing conflict tore through me. Could I trust these spectral beings? Would relinquishing the figurine truly bring peace, or would it unleash something far worse? Doubt gnawed at me, a bitter counterpoint to the desperate hope. "Alex," the voice echoed, softer now, almost a mournful plea. "Let us in." With a deep, shuddering breath, my hands trembling so violently I could barely hold the glowing object, I extended the figurine further into the darkness. "Take it," I pleaded, my voice cracking with fear and exhaustion. "Just take it and leave this house. Leave me alone." The figures remained still, their burning eyes fixed on the glowing wood, and the air around me grew intensely cold. The figurine pulsed with a final, blinding surge of energy, the glowing scratches flaring like miniature suns. And then, with a sharp, deafening crack that echoed through the silent basement, it violently exploded in my hands, the force sending shards of wood scattering across the cold concrete floor. A collective wail erupted from the assembled figures, a raw, agonizing scream that echoed through the basement, a chaotic symphony of release and perhaps pain. The vibrations in the floor intensified, a violent tremor shaking the very foundations of the house. Then, the screaming choked into a spectral gasp, the gaunt figures unraveling into shadow. The maddening whispers vanished into a silence heavier than any sound. The air, thick with mildew and a scent of cold iron and despair, held a deceptive calm. The house's weight pressed down, a silent, watchful presence. I stared at the figurine shards, a broken promise, and a shaky breath escaped, tasting of fear. It was over. Or so my mind desperately tried to believe, even as a glacial dread seeped into my marrow, whispering a far more sinister truth.